The CEO overheard her whisper she was a virgin, and he shut down the whole company for the day. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. She never imagined that a whispered truth could bring an empire to its knees. Jade Mitchell adjusted her charcoal blazer as she stepped into the glass elevator of Wolf Enterprises, her reflection multiplying infinitely in the polished mirrors. At 27, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned every step of her climb, from scholarship student to senior financial analyst at one of Chicago's most ruthless corporations. Her dark skin glowed against the crisp white of her silk blouse, and her natural hair was styled in an elegant twist that spoke of both professionalism and pride. Jade had learned early that in boardrooms filled with doubt about her capabilities, excellence wasn't optional, it was survival. The 41st floor buzzed with its usual controlled chaos. Assistants rushed between offices, phones rang in perfect corporate symphony, and the scent of expensive coffee mixed with the subtle tension that always preceded the Monday morning executive briefing. Morning, Jade. Rebecca, a blonde analyst from mergers and acquisitions, fell into step beside her. Ready for another thrilling week in the financial trenches? Jade smiled, genuine but measured. Always. Though I heard Wolf's been particularly focused lately. That was corporate speak for terrifying. Sebastian Wolf, CEO, founder, and the man Forbes had dubbed the Silence King, had built his empire on ruthless precision. At 36, he commanded respect through sheer presence and an intellect that could dismantle competitors with surgical efficiency. Jade had worked at Wolf Enterprises for 8 months. In that time, she'd seen him exactly 4 times, brief glimpses of a tall figure in perfectly tailored suits, dark hair always immaculate, moving through the executive floors like controlled lightning. She'd never spoken to him directly. She preferred it that way. The conference room was already filling when they arrived. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Lake Michigan, but Jade's attention was on her tablet, reviewing the quarterly projections she'd spent the weekend perfecting. "He's coming." The whisper rippled through the room like electricity. The door opened, and Sebastian Wolf entered. Jade had seen him from a distance, but this close the impact was visceral. He stood 6'3" with the kind of athletic build that suggested discipline, not vanity. His dark brown hair was perfectly styled, and his eyes, steel grey with flecks of blue, surveyed the room with the calm intensity of a predator. He wore a navy suit that probably cost more than her monthly salary, but it was his presence that commanded attention. Sebastian moved with the confidence of someone who had never doubted his right to be the most powerful person in any room. "Good morning." His voice was deep, controlled, with just enough warmth to remind everyone that charm could be as dangerous as ice. Jade focused on her notes, acutely aware of the way the room's energy shifted around him. She'd built her career on reading people, on understanding the subtle dynamics that drove decision-making. Sebastian Wolf was unreadable, a locked vault in an expensive suit. The meeting progressed with typical corporate efficiency: market projections, acquisition targets, risk assessments. Jade contributed when called upon, her analyses sharp and confident. She felt his gaze on her twice but didn't look up. Then disaster struck in the most mundane way possible. As Sebastian discussed the European expansion timeline, Jade reached for her water glass and knocked over her stack of backup reports. Papers scattered across the polished table and onto the floor. Heat rushed to her cheeks, but she maintained her composure. "Excuse me," she murmured, pushing back her chair. She knelt gracefully beside her chair, gathering the scattered documents. Rebecca leaned down to help, and in that moment of assumed privacy whispered, "So mysterious about your dating life, Jade. Come on, give me something. When was your last relationship?" Jade glanced around. The meeting continued above them, voices discussing profit margins and market penetration. She thought they were invisible, forgotten in the corporate shuffle. Her voice was barely audible, meant only for Rebecca's ears. I've never been with anyone." The admission hung in the air for exactly 3 heartbeats. Then she heard it, the slightest shift in breathing directly behind her. Jade's blood turned to ice as she realized Sebastian Wolf stood less than 2 feet away, having moved to retrieve a fallen pen from beneath the table. Their eyes met. His steel-grey gaze held hers for one impossible moment, and Jade saw something flicker across his features. Surprise, then something deeper, more dangerous. His pupils dilated slightly, and she watched his jaw tighten with what looked like supreme self-control. Time suspended. The meeting continued around them, but Jade felt as if the world had narrowed to the space between her kneeling figure and his towering presence. Sebastian straightened slowly, his movements careful, deliberate. He returned to the head of the table, but Jade noticed the subtle change, the way his fingers pressed against the table's edge, the slight tension in his shoulders. She gathered her papers with trembling hands and returned to her seat, acutely aware that something fundamental had shifted. For the remaining 20 minutes of the meeting, Sebastian's attention seemed to drift. His responses became more clipped, his usual laser focus fractured. Twice, Jade caught him looking at her with an intensity that made her pulse race. When he finally dismissed the room, his voice carried an edge of barely controlled tension. That concludes this morning's briefing. As colleagues filed out, Jade packed her materials with forced calm. She could feel his presence like heat against her back, could sense him watching her every movement. She reached the door and allowed herself one glance back. Sebastian Wolf stood at the window, his hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the city below. But in the glass reflection she could see his eyes, and they were fixed on her. The door closed between them, but Jade carried that image with her, the most powerful man in Chicago, motionless at his window, looking like a man who had just realized his entire world had shifted on its axis. Hand in the elevator descending to her floor, she wondered if she had any idea what she had just set in motion. He had never made a decision based on emotion until today. Sebastian Wolf stood frozen at his office window, his reflection ghost-like against the Chicago skyline. 42 floors below, the city moved with its usual ruthless efficiency, cars threading through traffic, people rushing to meetings that seemed suddenly meaningless. "I've never been with anyone." The words echoed in his mind like a song he couldn't stop hearing. 3 hours had passed since the meeting, and he couldn't focus on anything else. Not the merger proposal on his desk, not the conference call with Tokyo investors, not the quarterly projections that usually commanded his complete attention. Jade Mitchell. He'd noticed her before, of course. In a company of 800 employees, excellence had a way of standing out. Her financial analyses were flawless, her presentations sharp and confident. She carried herself with a quiet strength that commanded respect without demanding it. But this morning, kneeling beside that conference table, looking up at him with those deep brown eyes, vulnerable and proud at the same time, something inside him had snapped. Sebastian loosened his tie with fingers that trembled slightly. At 36, he had built Wolf Enterprises from a single-room startup into a multinational corporation worth $3 billion. He had conquered markets, outmaneuvered competitors, and earned the fear and respect of everyone who mattered in the business world. He had never not once been undone by a whispered confession. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mr. Wolf, the 3 p.m. board meeting, cancel it." The words left his mouth before his brain could intervene. "Sir?" Sebastian closed his eyes, feeling the weight of what he was about to do. Cancel everything, all meetings, all calls, everything. For today. For today. There was a pause. Margaret had been his assistant for 6 years and had never heard him sound like this. Raw, uncertain, almost reckless. "Should I reschedule? Send everyone home." The silence stretched so long, Sebastian wondered if the connection had died. "Everyone, sir. Everyone except essential security. Full pay. Effective immediately." He could practically hear Margaret's confusion through the speakers, but she was too professional to question him further. I'll send out the company-wide notification right away." Sebastian ended the call and slumped into his leather chair. What was he doing? In 15 years of building this empire, he had never allowed personal feelings to influence a single business decision. He prided himself on cold logic, strategic thinking, emotional discipline. But the image of Jade's face, that moment of startled vulnerability when their eyes met, had shattered something fundamental inside him. Never been with anyone. The thought was driving him mad, not just the innocence of it, but the quiet dignity with which she'd said it. No shame, no apology, just honest truth shared in what she thought was confidence. His phone buzzed with confused messages from department heads. His email filled with concerned inquiries from board members. The business news feeds would pick up the story within hours. Wolf Enterprises CEO sends entire workforce home. Market speculation runs wild. He didn't care. Sebastian stood and walked to his private elevator, his reflection multiplying in the polished steel doors. He looked like a man possessed. His usual perfect composure cracked around the edges. The 38th floor was already emptying when he arrived. Confused employees gathered their belongings, whispering about emergency shutdowns and corporate crises. Some looked worried. In the current economy, sudden closures could mean layoffs or bankruptcy. Sebastian moved through the chaos like a ghost, his attention focused on one destination, the financial analysis department. He found her exactly where he expected, at her desk, still working. While everyone else rushed to pack up and leave, Jade sat calmly at her computer, finishing what appeared to be a complex spreadsheet. She had removed her blazer, and the crisp white of her blouse made her dark skin glow under the fluorescent lights. Her natural hair had loosened slightly from its morning style, a few curls framing her face in a way that made Sebastian's chest tighten. She looked up as he approached, and he watched her posture straighten with professional alertness. No fear, no nervous energy, just quiet competence and genuine curiosity. "Mr. Wolf," her voice was smooth, professional. "Is everything all right?" The announcement seemed sudden. Sebastian stopped 3 feet from her desk, close enough to catch the subtle scent of her perfume, something warm and sophisticated that made him think of amber and silk. "Everyone else has gone home." His voice came out rougher than intended. Jade glanced around the now empty floor, then back at him with those intelligent brown eyes. "I wanted to finish the Morrison account reconciliation. It'll only take another 20 minutes. Of course she did. While everyone else panicked about the unexpected closure, Jade Mitchell stayed focused on her work, determined to complete her responsibilities, regardless of external chaos. It was exactly the kind of integrity that had caught his attention months ago, and exactly the kind of character that made her confession this morning so devastating. "Leave it." The words came out more like a command than he intended. Jade's eyebrows rose slightly, but she didn't bristle at his tone. Instead, she studied his face with the same analytical precision she brought to financial reports. "Are you sure? The client presentation is tomorrow." "I'm sure." She saved her work methodically, shut down her computer, and gathered her purse. Sebastian watched every movement, noting the elegant efficiency of her hands, the way she double-checked that her desk was organized before leaving. When she stood, they were alone on the entire floor. The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of shared secrets and unspoken questions. Jade waited with the patience of someone accustomed to reading between lines, her dark eyes never leaving his face. Sebastian took a step closer, then another. "You said something today." His voice was barely above a whisper. "Something I wasn't supposed to hear." Color rose in Jade's cheeks, but she didn't look away. "I know. Do you also know that it's been driving me insane for the last 4 hours?" Her breath caught, so softly he almost missed it. When she spoke, her voice carried a thread of steel beneath the velvet. "And do you know that I'm not ashamed of it?" The response hit him like electricity. No apology, no embarrassment, just quiet pride in her own truth. Sebastian closed the remaining distance between them until he could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. "I closed the company," he said simply. "I noticed. I sent 800 people home so I could talk to you alone." Jade tilted her head slightly, considering this information with the same thoughtful expression she wore during board meetings. "That's either very romantic or completely insane. Probably both." For the first time since he'd known her, Jade smiled, not the polite professional expression she wore in meetings, but something genuine and quietly amused that transformed her entire face. "Sebastian Wolf," she said, trying out his first name like she was tasting something rare and dangerous. "Are you asking me out?" The directness of the question should have surprised him. Instead, it felt like relief. No games, no corporate politics, just honest communication between two people who had suddenly discovered they were standing on the edge of something vast and unknown. "Yes." The word came out steady, certain. "I'm asking you out. Tonight. Right now." Jade studied his face for a long moment, and Sebastian felt as if she could see straight through to his soul. When she finally spoke, her voice was warm with quiet laughter. "Well then, I suppose I should say yes, shouldn't I?" And in that moment, with the empty office around them and the city lights beginning to twinkle below, Sebastian Wolf realized he had just made the first purely emotional decision of his adult life. It felt like waking up. She had never been courted by a man who could stop time until tonight. The drive to Navy Pier happened in a haze of nervous energy and stolen glances. Sebastian's Aston Martin purred through Chicago's evening traffic, the leather interior filled with the subtle tension of two people discovering they were about to cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Jade sat in the passenger seat, hyper-aware of everything, the way Sebastian's hands gripped the steering wheel, the clean scent of his cologne mixing with expensive leather, the city lights painting gold across his profile. She had changed into a midnight blue dress that hugged her curves without being obvious, paired with heels that made her feel elegant and powerful. Nervous? Sebastian's voice was soft, intimate in the enclosed space. Should I be? Jade turned to study his face. Even in profile, driving through downtown traffic, he was devastating. The sharp line of his jaw, the way his dark hair caught the streetlight, the controlled strength in his shoulders. Probably. His lips curved in the first genuinely playful smile she'd ever seen from him. I'm not exactly known for my subtlety. No, Jade agreed, surprising herself with her boldness. You're known for getting what you want. The words hung between them, loaded with implication. Sebastian glanced at her, and the heat in his steel-grey eyes made her pulse skip. And what do you think I want, Jade? The way he said her name, low, careful, like he was tasting something precious, sent warmth spiraling through her chest. I think, she said slowly, that's exactly what we're here to find out. The restaurant was a revelation of understated luxury. Perched on a private pier overlooking Lake Michigan, Serenity was the kind of place that didn't advertise because it didn't need to. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered unobstructed views of the water, and soft jazz mixed with the gentle sound of waves against the pier. Sebastian had reserved the entire waterfront section. You didn't have to, Jade began as the maitre d' led them to a table set for two, candles flickering in crystal holders. Yes, I did. Sebastian pulled out her chair, his fingers brushing her shoulders as she sat. The contact lasted only seconds, but it sent electricity down her spine. I've spent 8 months watching you command boardrooms full of people twice your age. Tonight I wanted to see you without the armor. Jade settled into her chair and looked up at him. What makes you think this isn't armor too? Sebastian paused halfway to his own seat, caught off guard by her perception. When he sat down across from her, his expression was something between admiration and hunger. Because, he said, reaching for the wine menu, armor doesn't blush. Heat flooded Jade's cheeks, proving his point, but instead of feeling embarrassed, she felt powerful. Sebastian Wolf, the man who had built an empire on reading people, was studying her like she was a mystery he desperately wanted to solve. The sommelier appeared with a bottle of Chateau Margaux that probably cost more than Jade's monthly rent, but Sebastian waved him away after pouring their glasses. To privacy, Sebastian said, raising his wine. To honesty, Jade countered, clinking her glass against his. They drank, and Jade felt the wine's warmth spread through her chest, loosening the careful control she always maintained. Around them the restaurant hummed with quiet elegance, but they might as well have been alone on a private island. Tell me something. Sebastian leaned forward, his attention completely focused on her. How does someone like you, brilliant, beautiful, absolutely magnetic, remain untouched? Jade finished for him, her voice carrying no shame. Is that really so impossible to believe? Sebastian's jaw tightened. It's not impossible. It's miraculous. The admission hit her like a physical force. Jade set down her wine glass, studying his face in the candlelight. You say that like it makes me more valuable. It doesn't make you more valuable, Sebastian said quietly. Nothing could do that. But it makes me feel... What? He was quiet for so long Jade thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, his voice was raw with honesty, protective, possessive, like I want to be the one to show you everything you've been waiting for. His grey eyes met hers, and terrified that I'm not worthy of that trust. The confession hung between them, vulnerable and electric. Jade felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble, not from pressure, but from choice. Sebastian, she said, reaching across the table to cover his hand with hers. His skin was warm, strong, and she felt him tense at the contact. What if I told you that worthiness isn't about what you've done or what you own or how many companies you've built? What's it about? Her thumb traced across his knuckles, marveling at the way such a powerful man could be undone by simple touch. How you make me feel when you look at me like I'm the only person in the world. Sebastian turned his hand palm up, catching her fingers and holding them. How do I make you feel? Seen, she said simply, like all the waiting was for something, for someone. The air between them crackled with so much tension, Jade wondered if the other diners could feel it. Sebastian's grip on her hand tightened. Jade. Her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. I need you to understand something. I've built my entire life on control, on strategy, on thinking 5 moves ahead. But sitting here with you, all of that just disappears. Is that frightening? Terrifying. His smile was soft, wondering, and completely addictive. Their appetizers arrived, but neither paid attention to the perfectly prepared food. They were too busy discovering each other. The way Jade's laugh could make Sebastian's entire body relax. How his genuine interest in her thoughts made her feel intellectually appreciated for the first time in her life. "Tell me about your family," Sebastian said, cutting his salmon but keeping his eyes on her face. "My parents are both professors at Northwestern," Jade said, surprising herself with how easy it was to share. "Literature and physics. They raised me to believe that intelligence was the most attractive quality a person could possess." They were right. The simple statement carried such conviction that Jade felt her cheeks warm again. "What about you? Any family in the Empire business?" Sebastian's expression shifted slightly, becoming more guarded. "My father built the foundation of what became Wolf Enterprises. He died when I was 22. Heart attack, brought on by stress and a lifestyle that prioritized work over everything else. I'm sorry. Don't be. He taught me everything about building a business and nothing about building a life." Sebastian's eyes found hers again. "I swore I'd never make his mistakes, but I've spent the last 14 years doing exactly that, until today." "What changed today?" Sebastian set down his fork and leaned back, studying her with an intensity that made Jade's breath catch. "You did. 3 words. Never been with anyone. And suddenly, everything I thought mattered seemed completely insignificant compared to the possibility of being the man you'd trust with that gift. The restaurant, the city, the entire world seemed to fade until there was only this table, this man, this moment of absolute honesty between them." "Sebastian," Jade said softly, "what are you asking me?" He stood abruptly, moving around the table until he was beside her chair. When he offered his hand, Jade took it without hesitation. "I'm asking you to take a walk with me," he said, his voice rough with barely controlled emotion. "And then I'm asking you to let me spend the rest of the evening showing you exactly how extraordinary you are." Jade rose, her hand still in his, and felt the last of her careful walls crumble completely. "Yes," she whispered. And as they walked toward the pier doors, Jade realized she had just said yes to much more than a simple walk. She had said yes to everything. She had never walked into her own transformation until tonight. The private pier stretched into Lake Michigan like a wooden bridge to another world. Sebastian had shed his suit jacket, his white dress shirt now open at the collar, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. Jade carried her heels in one hand, her other still wrapped securely in his as they walked toward the water. The night air was cool against her skin, carrying the fresh scent of the lake and the distant sounds of the city behind them. But all of Jade's attention was focused on the man beside her, the way his thumb traced gentle circles across her knuckles, how his usually perfect composure had given way to something raw and genuine. "I used to come here as a kid," Sebastian said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "My father would bring me when he needed to think through particularly difficult deals. He said water helped clear the mind." "Did it work?" Jade asked, curious about this glimpse into his past. "For business, yes. For everything else." Sebastian paused at the pier's edge, where wooden railings met endless dark water dotted with moonlight. "I don't think my father ever learned to clear his mind of anything that didn't involve profit margins." Jade studied his profile, noting the tension in his jaw. "Is that why you became so much like him?" The question hung between them, direct and unflinching. Lesser men might have deflected or grown defensive, but Sebastian turned to face her fully, his grey eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Yes," he said simply, "and no. I wanted to build something lasting, something that mattered, but somewhere along the way, I forgot that empires are meaningless if you have no one to share them with." Jade leaned against the railing, the wood smooth and warm beneath her arms. "What changed your mind? You want the truth?" "Always." Sebastian moved closer, until she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, could catch the subtle scent of his cologne mixed with lake air. "Watching you in meetings, the way you'd get this small line between your eyebrows when you were working through a complex problem, how you'd bite your lower lip when you were thinking, just the tiniest bit, like you didn't even realize you were doing it." Heat flooded Jade's cheeks. "You were watching me that closely." "Jade." His voice carried a note of amused exasperation. "I've been watching you since your 2nd week. At first I told myself it was professional interest. You're brilliant at what you do. But then I started noticing other things." "Such as?" Sebastian braced his hands on the railing on either side of her, not quite trapping her but creating an intimate space that felt separate from the rest of the world. "The way you always made sure the new interns felt included in meetings. How you'd stay late to help colleagues who were struggling with their analyses. The fact that you've never once used your intelligence as a weapon, even when dealing with people who underestimated you. Jade's breath caught. She had assumed her small kindnesses went unnoticed in the corporate machinery of Wolf Enterprises. Most people don't pay attention to things like that. Most people aren't falling in love. The words hit the air between them like lightning, electric and impossible to take back. Jade's eyes widened, her lips parting in surprise. Sebastian straightened abruptly, running a hand through his hair. Christ, I didn't mean to. That wasn't how I wanted to. Sebastian. Jade's voice cut through his stumbling apology, calm and clear. Look at me. He did, and she saw vulnerability there that took her breath away. The most powerful man in Chicago, reduced to uncertainty by 3 words he'd spoken without thinking. Are you? She asked softly. Am I what? Falling in love. Sebastian's jaw tightened, and for a moment Jade thought he might retreat into his corporate armor. Instead, he stepped closer, his hands coming up to frame her face with a gentleness that made her heart stutter. I'm not falling, he said, his voice rough with honesty. I've already fallen. Completely. Irrevocably. I think I started falling the day I hired you, and I just didn't have the courage to admit it until I heard you say you'd never been with anyone. Jade's world tilted, not because of his confession, but because of how right it felt. How perfectly his words aligned with feelings she'd been afraid to examine too closely. Why did that change everything? She whispered. Sebastian's thumbs traced along her cheekbones, his touch reverent. Because it made me realize that if I was going to love someone, really love someone, it should be someone pure enough to trust me with something that precious, someone strong enough to choose me, not because of what I could give them, but because of who they wanted me to become. Tears pricked at Jade's eyes, but they were tears of joy, of recognition, of finally understanding what people meant when they talked about finding the other half of their soul. And you think I'm that someone? I know you are. His voice was certain, unwavering. The question is whether you think I could be worthy of that trust. Jade reached up to cover his hands with hers, holding them against her face. Around them, the lake lapped gently against the pier posts, the city lights creating a romantic backdrop that seemed designed specifically for this moment. Sebastian, she said, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. I need you to understand something. Anything. I didn't stay inexperienced because I was afraid or shy or waiting for marriage. I stayed that way because I was waiting for someone who would see all of me, not just my body, but my mind, my ambitions, my dreams, and want all of it. Sebastian's breathing had gone shallow, his eyes never leaving her face. I was waiting, Jade continued, for someone who would make me feel like choosing them was the smartest decision I'd ever made, not a moment of weakness. Someone who would love my strength, not try to diminish it. And do you think, Sebastian's voice broke slightly, do you think I could be that person? Instead of answering with words, Jade rose on her tiptoes and kissed him. The contact was soft at first, tentative, a question asked and answered in the space of a heartbeat. Then Sebastian's arms came around her, pulling her closer, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like coming home and embarking on an adventure at the same time. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sebastian rested his forehead against hers. Jade, he murmured, her name like a prayer. I want to do this right. I want to court you properly, take you on dates, earn your trust completely before... Before what? She asked, amused by his sudden attack of gentlemanly restraint. Before I make love to you the way you deserve. His voice was rough with barely controlled desire. Slowly, completely, until you understand exactly how extraordinary you are. Heat pooled low in Jade's stomach at the promise in his words. And how long do you think this proper courting should take? Sebastian's smile was soft, wondering, full of anticipation. However long you need to be absolutely certain that choosing me is the smartest decision you've ever made. Jade laughed, the sound carrying across the water. What if I told you I'm already certain? Then I'd say we should probably get off this pier before I forget every promise I just made about taking things slowly. The desire in his voice sent shivers down Jade's spine, but it was tempered with such obvious respect for her boundaries that she felt more safe than she'd ever felt in her life. Take me home, Sebastian, she said softly. Your home or mine. Jade considered this, thinking of her modest apartment versus his undoubtedly luxurious penthouse. Yours. I want to see where the real Sebastian Wolf lives when he's not being the CEO. Sebastian's smile was brilliant, transformative. Then let's go discover him together. As they walked back down the pier, hands intertwined, Jade realized this was what she'd been waiting for her entire life. Not just physical intimacy, but emotional intimacy so complete it felt like sharing souls. And for the first time she understood that some things were worth the wait. She had never seen a powerful man's sanctuary until tonight. Sebastian's penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a sleek high-rise building in River North, and stepping inside felt like entering a completely different version of the man she thought she knew. Where Jade had expected cold minimalism and corporate sterility, she found warmth, character, and unexpected vulnerability. The living space was expansive but intimate, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Chicago's skyline. But it was the details that caught her attention: shelves lined with well-worn books, a baby grand piano positioned to catch the morning light, original artwork that spoke of personal taste rather than designer selection. "This isn't what I expected," Jade said, running her fingers along the spine of a first-edition Hemingway. Sebastian had moved to the bar cart, his movements careful as he poured 2 glasses of wine. "What did you expect? Glass and steel. Maybe a few strategically placed modern sculptures, the kind of place that looks like a magazine spread." She turned to study his face. "This looks like a home." Something in Sebastian's expression softened. "That's because it is. The only real one I've ever had." He handed her a glass of wine, a different vintage than dinner, something rich and complex that warmed her throat. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and Jade felt that familiar spark of electricity. "Tell me about the piano," she said, moving toward the instrument. The bench was positioned perfectly, sheet music scattered across the top in a way that suggested regular use, not decoration. Guilty pleasure. Sebastian followed her, and when she sat on the bench, he settled beside her close enough that their thighs touched. "My mother insisted I learn when I was young. Said music would teach me about emotion in ways business never could." Was she right? Instead of answering, Sebastian placed his hands on the keys and began to play. The melody was soft, haunting, something Jade didn't recognize, but that seemed to speak directly to her heart. His fingers moved with the same precision and control he brought to everything else, but there was something more: passion, longing, vulnerability expressed through music rather than words. "It's beautiful," Jade said when the last notes faded. "What was it?" "Something I wrote. For you, actually." Sebastian's admission was quiet, almost embarrassed. "I've been working on it for weeks, trying to capture what you make me feel." The confession hit Jade like a physical force. While she'd been carefully maintaining professional boundaries, Sebastian had been composing music inspired by her presence in his life. "Play it again," she whispered. This time, as Sebastian's hands moved across the keys, Jade watched his face. The careful corporate mask was completely gone, replaced by raw emotion and artistic passion. She saw the man beneath the CEO, sensitive, creative, desperately romantic, despite his reputation for cold calculation. When the music ended, the silence between them was heavy with unspoken desire. "Sebastian," Jade said softly, turning to face him fully, "I need to ask you something. Anything. This morning, when you heard what I said, what exactly went through your mind?" Sebastian's jaw tightened, and for a moment she thought he might deflect the question. Instead, he set down his wine glass and turned to face her completely. "Possession," he said, his voice rough with honesty. "Pure, primal possessiveness. The idea that someone like you, intelligent, beautiful, strong enough to command any room you enter, had never been touched, never been worshipped the way you deserve. It did something to me I can't quite explain." Heat flooded Jade's cheeks, but she didn't look away. "And what did you want to do about that feeling?" Sebastian's hands clenched into fists against his thighs. "Everything. I wanted to clear my schedule for a month and spend every moment showing you exactly how extraordinary you are. I wanted to be your first everything, first kiss, first touch, first taste of what it means to be completely desired." The raw honesty in his voice sent shivers down Jade's spine. "And now? Now I want all of that even more, but I also want to be your last everything, the only man who ever gets to see you come apart with pleasure, the only one you'll ever trust with that kind of vulnerability." Jade's breath caught. The combination of desire and reverence in Sebastian's voice was intoxicating, but it was the underlying emotion that truly undid her. Not just lust, but love so deep, it transformed physical desire into something sacred. "What if I told you," she said, reaching out to cover one of his clenched hands with hers, "that I've been thinking about the same things?" Sebastian went completely still. Jade, what if I told you that sitting in meetings with you, watching you command entire rooms of powerful people, has made me wonder what it would feel like to have all that intensity focused on just me? Sebastian's breathing had gone shallow, his grey eyes dark, with barely controlled desire. You shouldn't tell me things like that unless you're prepared for the consequences. What consequences? Instead of answering with words, Sebastian stood and offered her his hand. Come with me. Jade took his hand without hesitation, allowing him to lead her through the penthouse. They passed a chef's kitchen that looked well used, a library that could have belonged to a university, before stopping outside a set of double doors. My bedroom, Sebastian said, his voice carefully controlled. I'm not asking you to come inside. I'm asking you to choose. Whatever you decide, I'll respect completely. But I need you to know that if you walk through those doors with me, everything changes. Jade looked up at him. This powerful man who was offering her complete control over one of the most important decisions of her life. His face was tight with desire, but his eyes held only patience and respect. How does it change? She asked. Because tonight becomes the night I start showing you what it means to be loved by someone who sees you as both a goddess and a woman. Someone who wants to give you everything: pleasure, protection, partnership, passion, and ask for nothing in return except the privilege of being the man you choose. The words hung between them, a promise and a question wrapped in one. Jade felt her heart racing, not with fear but with anticipation, with the recognition that she was standing at the threshold of everything she'd been waiting for. Sebastian, she said, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. I have one condition. Name it. Don't treat me like I'm fragile. I may be inexperienced, but I'm not breakable. I want all of you, the passion, the intensity, the man who builds empires and writes music and closes companies for love. Sebastian's control cracked just for a moment, and Jade saw the full force of his desire flash across his features. Are you absolutely certain? Instead of answering, Jade stepped forward and opened the bedroom doors herself. The room beyond was a revelation of masculine luxury, a king-size bed with crisp white linens, more floor-to-ceiling windows, and soft lighting that made everything feel warm and intimate. But Jade barely noticed the decor. She was too focused on the way Sebastian followed her inside, closing the doors behind them with a soft click that sounded like a promise being sealed. No going back, he said softly. Jade turned to face him, feeling more powerful and feminine than she'd ever felt in her life. Good, I wouldn't want to. And as Sebastian crossed the room toward her, his eyes dark with love and desire, Jade realized she was about to discover exactly what she'd been waiting for all these years. It was going to be worth every moment of anticipation. She had never understood the difference between being taken and being chosen, until now. The space between them in Sebastian's bedroom felt electric, charged with the weight of everything unspoken. Jade stood near the windows, Chicago's lights painting her dark skin in gold and amber, while Sebastian remained by the doors, close enough to touch, far enough to let her set the pace. I've never done this, Jade said, her voice steady despite the rapid beating of her heart. But I know what I want. Sebastian's breathing was carefully controlled, his hands relaxed at his sides, despite the tension radiating from every line of his body. Tell me. I want you to stop holding back. She turned to face him fully, and the desire in his grey eyes nearly stole her breath. I want the man who closes companies on impulse, who composes music at midnight, who built an empire from nothing. I want all of that focused on me, Jade. Her name on his lips sounded like a warning and a prayer. If I stop holding back, then I'll finally understand what I've been waiting for. The words hung between them for one heartbeat. Two. Then Sebastian moved. He crossed the room in 3 strides, his hands coming up to frame her face with a gentleness that contrasted beautifully with the barely leashed power in his movements. Are you absolutely certain? Instead of answering with words, Jade rose on her tiptoes and kissed him. This kiss was different from their tentative exploration on the pier. This was claiming, demanding, a conversation conducted entirely through lips and breath, and the gentle collision of souls recognizing their perfect match. Sebastian's control cracked completely. His arms came around her, pulling her against him, and Jade felt the full force of his desire, not just physical, but emotional, spiritual, the need to possess and protect and worship, all wrapped into one overwhelming sensation. You're so beautiful, he murmured against her lips, his voice rough with reverence. So perfect. I want to memorize every inch of you. Heat pooled low in Jade's stomach at the promise in his words. She had expected awkwardness, uncertainty, the fumbling that came with inexperience. Instead, she felt powerful, feminine, completely safe in the hands of a man who looked at her like she was both treasure and temptation. Sebastian's hands moved to the zipper of her dress, but he paused, waiting for permission. Jade nodded, and she felt the whisper of cool air against her skin as the fabric loosened. God, Sebastian breathed, stepping back to look at her. You're going to be the death of me. Jade let the dress pool at her feet, standing before him in delicate lace that she'd chosen this morning, without knowing how prophetic the choice would be. Sebastian's gaze moved over her like a physical touch, reverent and hungry at the same time. Your turn, she said, surprised by her own boldness. Sebastian's smile was soft, wondering. Demanding already. I like that. He shrugged out of his shirt, and Jade's mouth went dry. She'd seen hints of his athletic build through well-tailored suits, but the reality was devastating. Broad shoulders, defined chest, the kind of physical strength that came from discipline rather than vanity. Now what? She whispered. Now, Sebastian said, moving closer until she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. I show you what it means to be worshipped by someone who loves you. The word love hung between them, no longer tentative but certain, acknowledged, claimed. Sebastian's hands traced along her arms, her shoulders, her collarbone, each touch gentle but possessive. You're trembling, he murmured, concern flickering across his features. Not from fear, Jade assured him, leaning into his touch. From anticipation. Sebastian's grey eyes darkened. Then let me give you something to anticipate. He lifted her easily, carrying her to the bed with the same controlled strength he brought to everything else. But when he laid her against the white linens, his movements were reverent, careful as if she were made of spun glass and starlight. Sebastian, Jade said, reaching for him, don't treat me like I'm fragile. Remember? I remember. He settled beside her, his hand tracing patterns on her skin that made her breath catch. But this is your first time, and I want it to be perfect. I want you to understand exactly how extraordinary you are. What followed was a masterclass in patience and passion. Sebastian mapped every inch of her skin with his hands, his lips, his whispered words of adoration. He found sensitive places she didn't know existed, drew responses from her body that left her gasping and reaching for more. You're so responsive, he murmured against her throat, his voice tight with barely controlled desire. So perfect. I could spend hours just learning what makes you sigh. Sebastian, please. Jade's voice was breathless, needy in a way that should have embarrassed her, but only made her feel more powerful. I know what you need. His lips found hers again, swallowing her soft moan. And I'm going to give you everything, but slowly, completely, until you understand that this is what you were waiting for. Time seemed to suspend as Sebastian introduced her to pleasures she'd only imagined. Each touch built on the last, creating a symphony of sensation that left Jade feeling completely undone and utterly safe at the same time. When he finally joined with her, moving with exquisite care and endless patience, Jade felt something fundamental shift inside her chest. This wasn't just physical intimacy. It was the recognition of two souls finding their perfect complement, two hearts finally beating in synchrony. I love you, Sebastian whispered against her ear, his voice rough with emotion and desire. I love you, Jade Mitchell. Completely. Forever. I love you too, she gasped, the words torn from her heart as much as her lips. I love you, Sebastian. All of you. What followed was beautiful, transformative, a slow dance of discovery that left them both changed in ways that went far beyond the physical. Sebastian moved with her, responding to every sigh and touch, until Jade felt herself building toward something vast and overwhelming. Let go, Sebastian murmured, his forehead pressed against hers. Trust me, let go completely. And Jade did. She surrendered to the sensation, to the man, to the love that had transformed from whispered possibility to blazing certainty. The release, when it came, left her gasping and clinging to Sebastian's shoulders, understanding finally what people meant when they talked about becoming one with another person. Sebastian followed her over the edge moments later, her name on his lips like a prayer of gratitude. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the white sheets, Sebastian's arms wrapped protectively around her, while Jade traced lazy patterns on his chest. No regrets? Sebastian asked softly, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Only one, Jade said, tilting her head to meet his eyes. Concern flickered across Sebastian's features. What? That we waited so long to be honest about this? She smiled, soft and satisfied and utterly content. I should have told you months ago that I was falling in love with you too. Sebastian's answering smile was brilliant, transformative. We have the rest of our lives to make up for lost time. Is that a promise? It's a guarantee. He pulled her closer until she was nestled completely against his side. I'm never letting you go, Jade Mitchell. Not ever. And as they drifted toward sleep, wrapped in each other's arms and the certainty of their love, Jade realized that some things truly were worth waiting for. This, Sebastian, love, the feeling of being completely known and utterly cherished, had been worth every moment of patience. It had been worth everything. She had never woken up in love, until today. Jade surfaced from sleep slowly, awareness returning in layers, silk sheets against her skin. The scent of Sebastian's cologne mixed with something distinctly masculine and intimate, warm sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, and wrapped around her like a protective shield, Sebastian's arms. She turned carefully in his embrace, not wanting to wake him, and found herself face to face with Sebastian Wolf, without his corporate armor. Sleep had softened the sharp angles of his face, and his dark hair was tousled in a way that made him look younger, almost vulnerable. This was the man who had composed music for her, who had closed an entire company just to ask her on a date, who had loved her with such reverence and passion that she finally understood why she had waited so long. Good morning, beautiful. Sebastian's voice was rough with sleep, but his grey eyes were alert, focused completely on her face. Good morning. Jade felt heat rise in her cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from the memory of everything they had shared. How long have you been awake? About 20 minutes. I've been watching you sleep. Sebastian's hand moved to trace along her jawline, his touch gentle. You look peaceful, happy. I am happy. The simple truth of it surprised her. Jade had expected to feel different this morning, perhaps awkward or uncertain. Instead, she felt centered, complete, like a puzzle piece that had finally found its proper place. Sebastian's smile was soft, wondering. No regrets in the light of day? Only that we have to get up eventually. Jade stretched against him, enjoying the way his breath caught at the movement. What time is it? Sebastian glanced at the clock on his nightstand and groaned. 7:30. We should probably... He stopped mid-sentence, his expression shifting from contentment to something like panic. What? The company. Christ, Jade, I sent everyone home yesterday with no explanation. By now the board will be in full crisis mode. The stock price, the press... Sebastian started to sit up, his mind already shifting into damage control mode. Jade placed a firm hand on his chest, stopping his movement. Sebastian, look at me. He did, and she saw the exact moment when his CEO persona tried to reassert itself, the tightening around his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, as he prepared to compartmentalize last night into something separate from his business responsibilities. Don't, she said simply. Don't what? Don't turn back into the Silence King on me. Not yet. Jade sat up, the sheet falling around her waist, completely unself-conscious in her nakedness. What happened yesterday, what happened last night? It matters. Don't let the corporate world make you think it doesn't. Sebastian's gaze moved over her face, reading something there that made his expression soften. You're right. I'm sorry. It's just, I've never had to balance something this important with what? Work? Jade's eyebrow arched. Sebastian, you're the CEO of your own company. You don't answer to anyone but yourself and the board. And last I checked, falling in love wasn't grounds for dismissal. No, but closing the company for a day because I was distracted by a beautiful woman might be. Jade leaned forward, her lips curving in a smile that was equal parts affection and challenge. Then we'd better make sure you have a very good explanation. Such as the truth. She kissed him softly, tasting sleep and possibility on his lips. That you realize life is too short to waste time pretending you don't want what you want. That you took one day to pursue something that could change everything. Sebastian's hands came up to frame her face, his thumbs stroking across her cheekbones. And did it? Change everything? You tell me. Jade's voice was soft, but her gaze was steady, challenging. Do you feel like the same man who walked into that meeting yesterday morning? Sebastian considered this, his grey eyes never leaving her face. When he spoke, his voice carried the certainty that had built empires. No, I feel like a man who finally has something worth protecting, that isn't made of contracts and profit margins. Then that's your explanation. They showered together, an experience that left Jade marveling at the casual intimacy of shared space, shared water, shared gentle touches that spoke of affection rather than passion. Sebastian was reverent, even in the mundane act of washing her hair, his fingers working through the strands with a care that made her feel precious. "I need to go home and change," Jade said as they toweled off. "I can't exactly wear last night's dress to the office." "About that?" Sebastian paused in the act of selecting a tie, his expression careful. "How do you want to handle this at work?" Jade understood immediately. Sebastian Wolf dating an employee would be gossip gold for the corporate rumor mill. More than that, it could raise questions about favoritism, professional ethics, workplace dynamics. "What do you want?" she asked, turning to face him fully. "I want to tell everyone that you're the most important thing that's ever happened to me," Sebastian said without hesitation. "I want to hold your hand in meetings and take you to lunch and make sure everyone knows you're mine." Heat bloomed in Jade's chest at the possessive note in his voice. But I also want to protect you from the inevitable speculation about how you got your position, whether you're qualified, all the ugly assumptions people make when they see a successful woman with a powerful man." Jade was quiet for a long moment, considering. She had worked too hard, climbed too many obstacles, proven herself too many times to let anyone reduce her accomplishments to a workplace romance. "What if we don't hide it, but we don't announce it either?" she suggested finally. "Let people draw their own conclusions. Anyone who matters, anyone worth working with, will judge me based on my work, not my personal life." Sebastian's relief was visible. "You're sure? It won't be easy. There will be comments, speculation." "Sebastian," Jade moved closer, straightening his tie with steady hands. "I didn't fall in love with you for easy. I fell in love with you because you're worth the complications." His answering smile was brilliant. "Have I mentioned that I love your brain?" "Once or twice, among other things." They arrived at Wolf Enterprises together, but separated in the lobby, Jade taking the elevator to her floor to change into the spare outfit she kept in her office, Sebastian heading to the executive level to face whatever crisis his impulsive decision had created. Jade's phone buzzed as she was touching up her makeup. "Board meeting at 10. I could use my smartest analyst there. S." She smiled, typing back quickly. "Your smartest analyst will be ready. Try not to close any more companies before then." J. His response was immediate. "No promises. You're very distracting." S. Jade laughed, feeling giddy in a way that had nothing to do with professional success and everything to do with being courted by a man who saw her intelligence as foreplay. The morning passed in a blur of spreadsheets and projections, but Jade found herself stealing glances at the clock, anticipating the board meeting with an excitement that had nothing to do with quarterly reports. At 9:55, she gathered her materials and headed for the executive conference room. Other department heads were already assembling, their expressions ranging from curious to concerned. Sebastian entered at exactly 10:00, looking every inch the powerful CEO in his perfectly tailored suit. But when his eyes found Jade across the room, she saw a flash of something private, intimate, meant only for her. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sebastian began, his voice carrying its usual authority, "I'm sure you're all wondering about yesterday's early closure." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. "I want to be completely transparent with you." Sebastian's gaze swept the room, commanding attention. "I made a decision based on personal, rather than professional considerations. I realized that I had been so focused on building this company that I had forgotten to build a life worth living." Jade felt her breath catch. He was actually doing it, telling the truth, consequences be damned. "I took one day," Sebastian continued, "to pursue something that I believe will make me not just a better person, but a better leader. Something that reminds me why we build companies in the first place, not just to accumulate wealth, but to create something meaningful, something that enhances life rather than consuming it." The room was silent, everyone hanging on his words. "I want to assure you that my personal revelations will only strengthen my commitment to this company and to all of you. But I also want you to know that I will never again prioritize profit margins over the things that truly matter." When the meeting ended an hour later, Jade lingered as the room emptied, pretending to organize her notes. When they were alone, Sebastian moved to stand beside her chair. "That was either very brave or very foolish," Jade said softly. "Probably both." Sebastian's hand brushed hers just briefly, "but it was honest." Jade looked up at him, This powerful man who had just risked his professional reputation for the sake of emotional truth and felt her heart expand with so much love, it almost hurt. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. Sebastian's smile was soft, private, full of promise. "Wait until you see what else I'm planning to risk for you." And as he walked away, leaving her with racing pulse and warm cheeks, Jade realized their story was just beginning. She had never been the center of such delicious attention until today. The office buzz was different Tuesday morning, not malicious or uncomfortable, but charged with the kind of romantic curiosity that made people smile behind their coffee cups. Jade felt it the moment she stepped off the elevator, and instead of feeling exposed, she felt powerful. "Someone looks radiant this morning," Rebecca commented as they waited for the elevator to the executive floor. The blonde analyst from mergers and acquisitions had always been perceptive about office dynamics. "That's quite a glow you have there, Jade." "Thank you," Jade replied simply, not bothering to hide her smile. She did feel radiant, loved, cherished, completely satisfied in ways she was still discovering. Her phone buzzed with a text that made her pulse quicken. "Conference room C in 5 minutes. Bring the Morrison projections." And that smile. Jade's cheeks warmed. Even in professional messages, Sebastian managed to make her feel like the most desired woman alive. Conference room C was empty when she arrived, but Sebastian was there within moments, closing the door behind him with deliberate care. The space felt intimate despite the corporate setting, or perhaps because of the contrast between the formal environment and the heat in his grey eyes. "Good morning, beautiful." His voice was low, meant for her ears alone. "Good morning, Mr. Wolf," Jade replied, playing the professional game even as her body responded to his presence. "You wanted to discuss the Morrison account." Sebastian's smile was slow, predatory. "Among other things." He moved closer, stopping just within the bounds of professional distance, but close enough that she could catch his scent, could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "How are you feeling this morning?" he asked, his eyes searching her face with genuine concern. "Any regrets? Any second thoughts?" "None." Jade's answer was immediate, certain. "You?" "Only that I had to wake up and come to work, instead of spending the entire day worshipping you properly." Heat pooled low in Jade's stomach at the promise in his voice. "Sebastian, I know. Professional setting." His hand brushed hers as he reached for the files she carried, the brief contact sending electricity up her arm. "But I needed to see you, to touch you even briefly, to make sure last night was real." "It was real." Jade's voice was soft, intimate. "More real than anything I've ever experienced." The meeting lasted an hour, and to any observer, it was purely professional. Two colleagues discussing quarterly projections and market analysis. But beneath the surface was a constant current of awareness, stolen glances, the brush of fingers when passing documents, voices that carried subtle undertones of shared intimacy. "Excellent work on the European market analysis," Sebastian said as they concluded, his tone appropriately businesslike. But his eyes held a private message meant only for her. "I'd like to discuss some of your recommendations in more detail, perhaps over dinner tonight." "I'd like that very much, Mr. Wolf." The rest of the day passed in a haze of stolen moments and building anticipation. Sebastian found reasons to stop by her department, always professional, always appropriate, but somehow managing to make each interaction feel like foreplay. At 2 p.m., Jade found a small gift box on her desk, with no card. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet with a tiny piano charm, so subtle that no one else would understand its significance, but meaningful enough to make her heart race. She sent him a single text, "Beautiful, thank you." His response came immediately, not nearly as beautiful as the woman wearing it. At 4 p.m., Sebastian's assistant delivered a coffee to her desk, her exact order from the morning, prepared perfectly. The cup came with a note written in Sebastian's careful handwriting, "Fuel for the brilliant mind I can't stop thinking about." By 5 p.m., Jade was practically vibrating with anticipation. The office had largely emptied, leaving only the dedicated workaholics and those with nowhere else to be. She was packing up her files when her phone rang. "My office!" Sebastian's voice was rough with barely controlled desire. "Now!" Jade took the elevator to the executive floor, her pulse racing with each passing floor. Sebastian's assistant had long since gone home, leaving the executive suite quiet and intimate. She found Sebastian at his desk, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, looking every inch the powerful man who had built an empire, and who looked at her like she was more valuable than all of it combined. Close the door, he said softly. Jade did, turning the lock with deliberate care. When she turned back, Sebastian was standing, moving around his desk toward her with purposeful strides. "I've been thinking about you all day," he said, stopping just close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "About last night, about the way you looked in my bed, about the sounds you made when I—" "Sebastian." Her voice was breathless, already affected by his proximity and the memories his words evoked. "I know we agreed to be professional during business hours," he continued, his hands coming up to frame her face. "But I'm finding it increasingly difficult to concentrate on anything but you. What are you suggesting we do about that?" Sebastian's smile was slow, dangerous, full of promise. "Come home with me again. Let me cook for you. Let me take care of you. Let me show you exactly how much I've missed touching you." The offer hung between them, loaded with possibility. Jade felt her careful professional composure crumbling under the weight of her desire for this man who had turned her world upside down in the most beautiful way possible. "What about the office gossip?" she asked, though her body was already leaning into his touch. "What about it?" Sebastian's thumbs traced along her cheekbones. "Let them talk. Let them wonder. Let them be jealous that I get to go home with the most extraordinary woman in Chicago." Jade laughed, feeling giddy with love and desire. "You're very sure of yourself, Mr. Wolf." "I'm sure of us." His voice was certain, unwavering. "I'm sure that what we have is worth any amount of office speculation. I'm sure that I want to spend every possible moment showing you exactly how much you mean to me." "In that case," Jade said, rising on her tiptoes to brush her lips against his, "take me home." The kiss that followed was soft but electric, a promise of everything the evening would hold. When they broke apart, both breathing slightly harder, Sebastian rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Jade Mitchell," he said simply, "and I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt that." "I love you too," she whispered back. "Now stop talking and show me exactly what you've been thinking about all day." Sebastian's answering smile was brilliant, transformative, full of love and desire and endless possibility. And as they left the office together, not hiding their connection but not flaunting it either, Jade realized that this was what happiness felt like, being completely known and utterly cherished by someone who saw her strength as beautiful and her love as a gift. Tonight would be even better than last night, and tomorrow would be better still. They had the rest of their lives to discover just how extraordinary love could be. She had never known that love could feel like coming alive, until tonight. Sebastian's penthouse felt different this second evening, less like a revelation and more like a homecoming. Jade moved through the familiar space with growing confidence, watching Sebastian in his kitchen as he prepared dinner with the same precise attention he brought to everything else. "You're staring," he said without looking up from the salmon he was seasoning, but she could hear the smile in his voice. "I'm admiring." Jade settled onto one of the bar stools, resting her chin in her hand. "I like watching you cook. It's domestic, sweet." Sebastian glanced up, his grey eyes warm with amusement. "Sebastian Wolf is not supposed to be sweet." "The CEO isn't sweet," Jade agreed. "But the man who composes music at midnight and remembers exactly how I like my coffee, he's devastatingly sweet." Sebastian moved around the kitchen island until he stood behind her stool, his hands settling on her shoulders. "Only for you," he murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "The rest of the world gets the corporate version. And what do I get?" Sebastian's hands slipped down to rest on her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "You get everything. Every thought, every feeling, every part of me I've been saving for the right person." Jade leaned into his warmth, marveling at how natural this felt, being held by him, being cherished, being the center of this powerful man's attention. "Sebastian? Last night when you said you loved me, did you mean it, or was it just the moment?" Sebastian turned her around on the stool until she was facing him, his expression serious. "Jade Mitchell, I have never said those words to another woman in my life, not once, not ever." His hands framed her face with infinite gentleness. "When I told you I loved you, I meant it with every fiber of my being." The conviction in his voice made Jade's chest tighten with emotion. "I've never said them either to anyone. And now? Now I can't imagine my life without saying them to you every day." Jade's smile was soft, wondering. "I love you, Sebastian. Not the CEO, not the empire builder. You, the man who closes companies for love and writes me music and looks at me like I'm everything he's been waiting for." Sebastian's answering kiss was soft, reverent, full of promises that went far beyond physical desire. When they broke apart, both breathing slightly harder, he rested his forehead against hers. "Dinner can wait," he said, his voice rough with emotion and want. "Can it?" Jade's voice was teasing, but her hands were already moving to the buttons of his shirt. "That's quite a change in priorities for such a disciplined man." "You've changed all my priorities." Sebastian's hands covered hers, stilling them against his chest. "But tonight I want to take my time with you. I want to show you exactly what forever feels like." The promise in his words sent heat spiraling through Jade's body. "Forever is a very long time, Mr. Wolf. Not nearly long enough." Sebastian lifted her easily from the stool, carrying her toward his bedroom with the same controlled strength that made her feel both protected and desired. "Not when it comes to loving you." What followed was different from their first night together. Less desperate discovery and more deliberate worship. Sebastian took his time mapping every inch of her skin, finding new ways to make her gasp and sigh, showing her depths of pleasure she hadn't known existed. "You're so beautiful," he murmured against her throat, his voice rough with reverence. "So perfect. Sometimes I can't believe you're real." "I'm real," Jade breathed, her hands tangling in his hair as he lavished attention on the sensitive spot where her neck met her shoulder. "I'm here, I'm yours." "Mine," Sebastian agreed, the word carrying such possessive satisfaction that it sent shivers down Jade's spine. "Only mine." When he finally joined with her, moving with exquisite care and endless patience, Jade felt something shift inside her chest. Not the overwhelming discovery of first love, but the deeper recognition of souls finding their perfect match. "I love you," Sebastian whispered against her ear as they moved together in perfect synchrony. "I love your strength, your intelligence, your incredible heart. I love the way you challenge me and support me and make me want to be better than I ever thought possible." "I love you too," Jade gasped, her body building toward something vast and overwhelming. "I love your passion, your dedication, the way you love me like I'm precious. I love that you chose me." "I'll choose you every day for the rest of my life," Sebastian promised, his voice fierce with conviction. "Every morning, every moment, every breath, I choose you." The release, when it came, left them both gasping and clinging to each other, understanding once again that what they shared went far beyond the physical. Afterward, they lay tangled in Sebastian's Egyptian cotton sheets, Jade's head on his chest, while he traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "Sebastian?" Jade's voice was soft, contemplative. What happens now? I mean, after tonight, after this week, where do we go from here?" Sebastian's hand stilled on her skin. When she looked up at him, his grey eyes were serious, intent. "What do you want to happen?" Jade considered the question, thinking about everything that had changed in just a few days. "I want more nights like this, more mornings waking up in your arms, more stolen moments during the day when we pretend to be professional but can barely keep our hands off each other." Sebastian's smile was soft, wondering. And I want to meet your friends. I want you to meet my parents. I want to stop feeling like we're living in a beautiful bubble and start building something real and lasting." "Jade!" Sebastian shifted until they were face to face, his expression intense. "Are you talking about a future? A real future?" "I'm talking about love," Jade said simply. "Real love. The kind that grows stronger instead of fading, that builds something beautiful instead of just consuming everything in its path." Sebastian was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing along her cheekbone. When he spoke, his voice was soft but absolutely certain. "Move in with me." Jade blinked, caught off guard by the suddenness of the request. "What?" "Move in with me," Sebastian repeated, his voice gaining strength. "I know it's fast, I know it's crazy, but Jade, I can't imagine waking up without you anymore. I don't want to spend another night in this bed alone." "Sebastian," Jade's heart was racing, not with fear but with excitement and possibility. "I'm not asking you to give up your independence or your career or anything that makes you who you are," he continued, his words tumbling out with unusual vulnerability. "I'm asking you to share your life with me, to let me take care of you while you take care of me, to build something together that's bigger and better than anything either of us could create alone." Jade searched his face, seeing nothing but honesty and hope and love so deep it took her breath away. "You're serious," she said softly. "I'm completely serious. I want to wake up with you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. I want to cook dinner for you and listen to your thoughts about work and hear you laugh at terrible movies. I want all of it, Jade. Everything." The words hung between them, a question and a promise wrapped in one. Jade felt her heart expanding with so much love and possibility that she thought she might burst from it. "Yes," she whispered. Sebastian went completely still. "Yes? Yes, I'll move in with you. Yes, I want to build something beautiful together. Yes to everything you just offered and everything we haven't even imagined yet." Sebastian's smile was brilliant, transformative, full of joy and relief and infinite love. "Are you sure?" Instead of answering with words, Jade kissed him, soft, deep, full of promise and certainty, and the absolute knowledge that she was exactly where she belonged. When they broke apart, both laughing and crying and overwhelmed with happiness, Sebastian pulled her closer. "I love you, Jade Mitchell," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "more than I thought it was possible to love another person." "I love you too, Sebastian Wolf," she replied, settling against his chest with perfect contentment, more than words could ever express. And as they drifted towards sleep, wrapped in each other's arms and the certainty of their future together, Jade realized that some love stories didn't need drama or conflict to be extraordinary. Sometimes the most beautiful stories were simply about two people finding each other and choosing every day to build something magnificent together. Their story was just beginning, and it was going to be perfect. She had never believed in fairy tale endings until she started living one. 3 weeks later, Jade stood in what would soon be their shared walk-in closet, watching Sebastian hang his suits next to her dresses with the same meticulous attention he brought to everything he loved. Sunlight streamed through the penthouse windows, casting everything in golden warmth that matched the glow she carried everywhere now. "You're doing it again," Sebastian said without turning around, but she could hear the smile in his voice. "Doing what?" "Staring at me like you can't quite believe this is real." He finished hanging his jacket and turned to face her, his gray eyes soft with contentment. "It's real, Jade, we're real." "I know." Jade moved closer, reaching up to straighten his tie, a morning ritual that had become as natural as breathing. "Sometimes I look at you and remember that man who closed an entire company just to ask me on a date, and I can't believe he's mine." Sebastian's hands came up to frame her face, his touch gentle and reverent. "Completely yours, forever yours." The words still had the power to make her heart race, even after 3 weeks of waking up in his arms, sharing coffee and conversation and stolen kisses throughout their days. "Are you ready for tonight?" Sebastian asked, his thumb tracing along her cheekbone. Tonight, the charity gala where they would make their first official public appearance as a couple, not because they were hiding anymore, but because Sebastian had wanted to plan something special, something that honored both her strength and their love. "Are you?" Jade countered, studying his face. "It's not too late to change your mind about the surprise you won't tell me about." Sebastian's smile was mysterious, full of mischief and something deeper that made her pulse quicken. "Trust me." "I do." The words came without hesitation, absolute truth wrapped in 2 simple syllables. "I trust you completely." The gala was everything Jade had expected from a Sebastian Wolf event. Elegant, sophisticated, attended by Chicago's most influential power players. She wore a midnight blue gown that hugged her curves like liquid silk, and Sebastian, in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, looked like every woman's fantasy of masculine perfection. But what surprised her was how comfortable she felt. Moving through the crowd on Sebastian's arm, she wasn't the nervous financial analyst trying to prove herself. She was simply Jade, confident, radiant, completely secure in her place beside the man she loved. "You're magnificent," Sebastian murmured in her ear as they paused between conversations with donors. "Absolutely magnificent. Flattery will get you everywhere, Mr. Wolf." "I'm counting on it, Ms. Mitchell." They danced to a jazz quartet, Sebastian's hand warm and possessive on her lower back, and Jade felt like she was floating. This was what love felt like, not the desperate passion of new romance, but the deep certainty of souls that had found their perfect match. "Ladies and gentlemen," the Master of Ceremonies announced as the evening reached its peak, "if I could have your attention, please. Mr. Sebastian Wolf has a special announcement." Jade looked at Sebastian in surprise, but he was already leading her toward the small stage at the front of the ballroom. Her heart began to race, not with fear, but with anticipation for whatever surprise he had planned. Sebastian took the microphone, his presence commanding the attention of everyone in the room. But when he spoke, his voice was warm, intimate, as if he were talking only to her. "3 weeks ago," Sebastian began, "I made what some people considered a very impulsive business decision. I closed Wolf Enterprises for an entire day, sent 800 employees home, and effectively shut down a multi-billion-dollar operation. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jade felt hundreds of eyes on them, but Sebastian's gaze never left her face. "I want to tell you why I did that. I did it because I had just discovered that the most extraordinary woman I had ever met, brilliant, beautiful, stronger than anyone I knew, had never been loved the way she deserved. And I realized that everything I had built, every success I had achieved, every empire I had created meant absolutely nothing if I didn't have the courage to pursue something that truly mattered." Jade's breath caught, tears pricking at her eyes as she understood what he was doing. "Jade Mitchell," Sebastian continued, his voice thick with emotion, "you have transformed my life in ways I never thought possible. You've made me a better man, a better leader, a better human being. You've shown me that true strength isn't about controlling everything around you. It's about having the courage to surrender to something beautiful." Sebastian stepped closer, taking her hands in his, and Jade saw the depth of love in his grey eyes, the absolute certainty that had guided every decision he'd made since that morning in the conference room. "I love your intelligence, your integrity, your incredible heart. I love the way you challenge me and support me and make me laugh. I love that you've never asked me to be anything other than exactly who I am, and I love that you let me love exactly who you are." The ballroom had gone completely silent, everyone holding their breath as Sebastian dropped to one knee. Jade's hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks, as Sebastian pulled out a ring that caught the light like captured starfire. "Jade Mitchell," Sebastian said, his voice carrying across the silent room, "will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life showing you how extraordinary you are? Will you build an empire with me, not of business and profit, but of love and partnership and everything beautiful that two people can create together?" Time suspended. The room, the crowd, the entire world disappeared until there was only Sebastian kneeling before her, offering her everything he was and everything he hoped to become. "Yes," Jade whispered, then louder, her voice ringing with joy and certainty. "Yes, Sebastian Wolf, yes to everything." The ballroom erupted in applause as Sebastian slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect diamond surrounded by smaller stones that sparkled like the tears of joy on her cheeks. When he stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the love and promise their future held, Jade felt the last piece of her heart click into place. "I love you," Sebastian murmured against her lips as the crowd continued to cheer around them. "I love you too," Jade replied, holding him tight enough to convince herself this wasn't all a beautiful dream, more than words could ever express. Later, much later, they stood on the penthouse balcony overlooking the Chicago skyline, still in their formal wear but barefoot and completely content. Jade's ring caught the city lights, sending tiny rainbows across her hand. "No regrets?" Sebastian asked, his arms wrapped around her from behind. "Only one," Jade said, leaning back against his chest. "What's that?" "That it took you so long to overhear me in that conference room." She turned in his arms, her smile soft and teasing. "Think of all the time we wasted pretending we didn't want this." Sebastian's laugh was rich, full of joy and possibility. "We have the rest of our lives to make up for lost time. Is that a promise?" "It's a guarantee." Sebastian's voice was soft, but absolutely certain. "I'm going to love you for 50 years, Jade Mitchell, soon-to-be Wolf. I'm going to wake up every morning grateful that you chose me, and I'm going to spend every day proving that I was worthy of that choice." 50 years? Jade pretended to consider this. "That seems ambitious." "You're right." Sebastian's smile was brilliant, transformative. "Let's make it forever." And as they kissed under the Chicago stars, surrounded by the city lights and the promise of everything their love would become, Jade realized that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories began with the simplest truths. A whispered confession, a powerful man undone by love, a company closed for the sake of a first date, and two souls finally brave enough to choose each other over everything else. Their empire was built on love, and it was going to last forever. Some things really were worth the wait. 2 years later, she had never imagined that happiness could feel like coming home every single day, until now. Jade Wolf, and she still felt a thrill every time she saw her married name, stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of their penthouse, watching the Chicago skyline paint itself in shades of amber and gold as the sun set behind the city she had come to love even more deeply. In her arms, 6-month-old Emma Wolf slept peacefully, her tiny fist curled around Jade's finger with the same determination her father showed in everything he touched. She had Sebastian's dark hair and Jade's warm brown skin, and when she opened her eyes, they were the perfect blend of both parents, golden brown with flecks of grey that made both her parents melt completely. "There are my girls." Sebastian's voice was soft, full of the wonder that still coloured every moment of their life together. Jade turned to find her husband in the doorway, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, looking every inch the successful CEO he remained, but softer now, gentler, transformed by love and fatherhood into something even more magnificent than the man she had fallen for in that conference room. "How was the board meeting?" Jade asked as Sebastian crossed the room to wrap both his wife and daughter in his arms. "Profitable, productive, utterly boring compared to this." Sebastian pressed a kiss to the top of Emma's head, then another to Jade's temple. "How was your day, Mrs. Wolf?" "Perfect." And it was true. Jade had returned to work 3 months ago, now as Chief Financial Officer of Wolf Enterprises, a promotion Sebastian had insisted on not because she was his wife, but because she was the most qualified person for the position. "Emma and I had lunch with my parents. Then she charmed everyone at the office during our afternoon visit." Sebastian's smile was soft, proud. She gets that from her mother, the charm and the brilliance. She gets the determination from her father, and the ability to wrap powerful men around her tiny finger. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching their city light up as darkness fell. Emma stirred in Jade's arms, making the small sounds that meant she would wake soon and demand attention with the imperious attitude of a true wolf. "Do you ever think about it?" Jade asked softly. "That morning when I spilled those papers, how different everything would be if you hadn't been standing right there." Sebastian's arms tightened around them both. "Every day. And every day I'm grateful for whatever cosmic force put me in exactly the right place, at exactly the right moment to overhear the woman I was meant to love admit something that changed both our lives forever, Sebastian." Jade's voice carried a note of wonder that still appeared whenever she contemplated the beautiful impossibility of their love story. "Do you think we would have found each other anyway? Eventually?" "Yes." His answer was immediate, certain. "Maybe it would have taken longer. Maybe it would have happened differently, but Jade, we were meant for each other. I believe that with every fibre of my being." Emma chose that moment to wake up, her small cry demanding immediate attention. Sebastian reached for his daughter, and Jade watched with the same amazement she felt every day as this powerful man, who commanded boardrooms and built empires, became putty in the hands of a 6-month-old baby. "Hello, beautiful," Sebastian murmured, settling Emma against his chest with practiced ease. "Did you have sweet dreams?" Emma responded by grabbing his tie and attempting to put it in her mouth, making both parents laugh. "She's going to be trouble," Jade observed, smoothing down Emma's dark hair. "She's going to be extraordinary," Sebastian corrected, "just like her mother." As if summoned by their voices, the baby grand piano in the corner seemed to call to Sebastian. Still holding Emma, he moved to the bench, settling down with their daughter in his lap. "Want to hear the song Daddy wrote for Mummy?" Sebastian asked Emma, who gurgled happily in response. Sebastian's hands found the keys, and the melody that filled the air was both familiar and completely transformed. It was the song he had been working on when Jade first heard him play, but evolved now, more complex, layered with harmonies that spoke of love discovered, nurtured, and grown into something magnificent. Jade settled beside them on the bench, her head on Sebastian's shoulder, watching their daughter's wide eyes track the movement of her father's fingers across the keys. "It's beautiful," Jade whispered. "Different from before, but beautiful." "Love songs should evolve," Sebastian said softly, never missing a note. "The melody stays the same, but the harmony gets richer, more complex, more beautiful with time." When the song ended, Emma clapped her tiny hands together, whether in appreciation for the music or simply because she liked the sound. Neither parent cared. It was perfect either way. "Sebastian," Jade said as they prepared Emma for bed later that evening, moving through the domestic routine that had become as natural as breathing. "Do you remember what you said that first night on the pier, about spending the rest of your life showing me how extraordinary I was? I remember everything about that night." Sebastian looked up from where he was fastening Emma's pajamas. "Why?" "Because you've done it. Every single day since then, you've made me feel extraordinary. But do you know what the most extraordinary thing is? Tell me, that you let me do the same for you." Jade moved to stand beside him, their daughter now clean and sleepy between them. "You let me love you, support you, challenge you. You didn't just want to take care of me, you wanted us to take care of each other." Sebastian's smile was soft, understanding. That's what partnerships are, isn't it? Two people making each other better, stronger, happier than they ever could be alone. Is that what we have? A partnership. We have everything, Jade. Sebastian reached for her hand, linking their fingers together the way he had that first night when they'd walked down the pier toward their future. We have love, partnership, friendship, passion, a family, a future that's brighter than anything I ever imagined possible. Emma yawned hugely, reminding them that some things were more important than romantic declarations, like getting babies to bed on time. As they settled their daughter in her crib, watching her drift toward sleep with the absolute contentment of a child who knew she was completely loved and utterly safe, Jade felt the same deep satisfaction she experienced every night. "No regrets?" Sebastian asked as they moved through their own nighttime routine, the question that had become their private ritual. "Only one," Jade replied, the same answer she gave every night. "What's that?" "That I can't go back and tell that nervous 27-year-old woman dropping papers in a conference room that she was about to meet the love of her life, that all her patience, all her waiting, all her careful choices were leading her to exactly the right person at exactly the right moment." Sebastian pulled her into his arms, and even after 2 years of marriage, Jade felt the same thrill of rightness she'd experienced the first time he held her. "She figured it out eventually," Sebastian said, his voice warm with love and amusement. "And look what she built while she was waiting." "We built," Jade corrected, rising on her tiptoes to kiss him. "Everything we have, we built together." "Together," Sebastian agreed, kissing her back with all the love and promise their future still held. And as they settled into bed together, Emma sleeping peacefully in the next room, the Chicago skyline glittering beyond their windows, their life spread around them like a dream made manifest, Jade realized that some love stories didn't end. They just kept getting more beautiful. Sebastian had kept his promise. He had spent every day for 2 years showing her exactly how extraordinary she was, and she had done the same for him. Their empire wasn't built of steel and glass and profit margins. It was built of morning coffee shared in comfortable silence, of lullabies sung to their daughter, of stolen kisses during board meetings, of love that grew stronger and deeper and more magnificent with each passing day. It was built of choosing each other again and again, through every ordinary moment and every extraordinary day. And it was going to last forever, because some whispered truths are powerful enough to build worlds. The end. Your participation means a lot to the channel. Please share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in Jade's place? Would you have made the same choice Sebastian did? How did this story of forbidden love and corporate power make you feel? Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.